St. Mary's Hospital, an old, sprawling building with a history of eerie occurrences and ghost stories. The hospital is dimly lit, with flickering lights and long, narrow corridors that seem to stretch into darkness. The basement, where the old service elevator is located, is particularly notorious for its unsettling atmosphere and strange noises that echo through the empty halls at night. Anna walked briskly through the dimly lit corridors of St. Mary's Hospital, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the night shift. The hospital was eerily quiet, save for the occasional beep of a heart monitor or the distant murmur of doctors discussing cases. The smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air, mingling with the faint scent of something metallic and unidentifiable. As she approached the nurse's station, she saw Mark, the security guard, sipping his coffee and glancing at the monitors displaying the hospital surveillance footage. His face was lined with fatigue, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "Hey, Anna," he greeted her with a nod. "Quiet night so far?" "Too quiet," she replied, a shiver running down her spine. "I keep feeling like someone's watching me." Mark chuckled, but it lacked warmth. "It's this place. Gives everyone the creeps after dark. You know about the old service elevator in the basement, right?" Anna nodded. The elevator was the stuff of legend among the staff, a relic from the hospital's early days that was now mostly avoided. Strange noises, flickering lights, and the occasional malfunction had earned it the nickname, the Elevator of Death. Ethan, the new intern, joined them at the station, his face pale and eyes wide with nervousness. "I heard some of the older nurses talking about the elevator. They say it's haunted." Mark shrugged. "People say a lot of things, but I've seen some weird stuff on the cameras. Things that don't make sense." Anna felt a chill. "Like what?" "Shapes moving in the shadows, doors opening and closing on their own, lights flickering even when the power's stable. It's like someone, or something, is down there." Just then, Dr. Emily Harper walked by, her presence commanding and almost icy. She paused, glancing at the three of them with a frown. "If you have time to gossip, you have time to work," she said curtly, before continuing down the hall. "She's always so cheerful," Ethan muttered under his breath, and Anna couldn't help but laugh softly, though the tension in her stomach didn't ease. The hours dragged on, and as the night deepened, Anna found herself assigned to transport some files to the archives in the basement. She hesitated, the stories about the elevator gnawing at her nerves, but she couldn't avoid it. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed the files and headed towards the service elevator. The basement was even darker and colder than the rest of the hospital. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on the peeling paint and exposed pipes. The elevator doors loomed ahead, a dark, foreboding presence. She pressed the call button and waited, her heart pounding. The elevator arrived with a groan of ancient machinery, and the doors slid open with a grating noise. She stepped inside, her fingers trembling as she pressed the button for the basement archives. The ride was agonizingly slow. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The elevator shuddered, making strange, unsettling noises. Suddenly, it jolted to a stop, the lights going out completely, plunging Anna into darkness. Panic surged through her. She fumbled for her phone, using its flashlight to pierce the blackness. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to stay calm. The temperature seemed to drop, and she felt an icy breeze brush against her skin. Then she heard it, a faint whispering, barely audible over the pounding of her heart. It seemed to come from all around her, echoing in the confined space. She strained to listen, her blood running cold as the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Help us, set us free." The voices were filled with anguish and despair, and Anna felt a deep sense of dread. She banged on the elevator doors, desperate to escape, but they wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, as if the spirits were closing in on her. Suddenly, the elevator lurched back to life, the lights flickering on. The doors opened, and Anna stumbled out, gasping for breath. She found herself in the basement corridor, but it looked different, older, more decayed. The air was thick with the smell of rot and decay. As she walked down the corridor, she saw figures in the shadows. Pale, gaunt faces with hollow eyes, watching her with a mix of sorrow and anger. She backed away, her heart pounding in terror, and bumped into something solid. She turned to see Mark standing behind her, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Anna, we need to get out of here. Now." "What's happening?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," he replied, his voice shaking, "but I think we've awakened something. Something that's been trapped down here for a long time." They hurried back to the elevator, but the doors wouldn't open. The whispers grew louder, the air growing colder. Ethan appeared, his face twisted in terror. "We're not alone," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They're coming for us." The lights flickered and went out again, plunging them into darkness. The whispers turned into screams, echoing through the corridors, filling their minds with terror. Suddenly, the elevator doors creaked open, revealing a darkness that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Anna felt a force pulling her towards it, and she fought to resist, her mind racing with fear. As the darkness closed in, she realized with a sinking feeling that the elevator wasn't just a machine. It was a gateway. A gateway to something far more sinister and deadly than she could have ever imagined. The last thing she saw was Dr. Emily Harper standing in the doorway, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Welcome to the other side," she whispered, a sinister smile spreading across her face. And then, the darkness swallowed them whole, leaving nothing but the echoes of their screams. Anna's eyes fluttered open, but the darkness was so complete that she wondered if she had awoken at all. The air was heavy with a musty, decayed scent, and she could hear distant, disembodied whispers, like a chorus of the damned. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a painful reminder that she was still alive, still trapped in this nightmare. "Mark? Ethan?" she called out, her voice trembling. A hand grasped her shoulder, and she screamed, only to realize it was Ethan, his face barely visible in the dim light of his phone's dying screen. His eyes were wide with fear, and he looked as if he might collapse at any moment. "We're not alone," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I saw them, shadows moving, eyes watching us." Mark appeared out of the darkness, his flashlight casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. "We need to find a way out of here," he said, his voice steady despite the terror in his eyes. "Stay close and keep quiet." They began to move through the labyrinthine corridors, the oppressive silence broken only by their cautious footsteps and the distant, mournful whispers. The hospital seemed to have transformed into a twisted version of itself, with the walls pulsating as if alive, and the shadows seeming to reach out towards them. As they turned a corner, they came face to face with a figure standing in the middle of the corridor. It was Dr. Emily Harper, her once cold eyes now glowing with an unnatural, sinister light. Her smile was twisted into something inhuman, a mockery of warmth. "Welcome," she said, her voice echoing unnaturally. "You've crossed into our world now. There is no escape." Anna felt a surge of panic. "What do you want from us?" Dr. Harper tilted her head, her smile widening. "You are part of the hospital now, just as we are. It feeds on your fear, your pain. You will never leave." Suddenly, the walls seemed to close in, the shadows becoming solid and pushing them towards the elevator at the end of the corridor. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling their minds with despair. Mark tried to push back, but the force was too strong. "We have to fight it," he yelled, but his voice was drowned out by the cacophony of screams. Anna felt herself being pulled towards the elevator, its doors wide open, the darkness inside beckoning. She fought to resist, but the pull was irresistible. As she was dragged closer, she saw faces in the shadows. Faces of those who had been trapped before, their eyes hollow, their mouths open in silent screams. Just as she was about to be swallowed by the darkness, she heard a voice, clear and strong, cutting through the chaos. "Anna, hold on." It was Ethan. He had found an old, rusted crowbar and was using it to wedge the elevator doors open. The darkness seemed to recoil at the sight of the metal, and for a moment, the pull lessened. "Come on," he shouted, his face contorted with effort. "We have to get out of here." With renewed strength, Anna and Mark pushed against the force, inching their way towards Ethan. The shadows clawed at them, but they kept moving, driven by sheer desperation. Finally, they reached the elevator, and Ethan pulled them through the doors, slamming them shut behind them. The darkness outside howled in fury, but they were safe, for now. The elevator jerked into motion, and Anna felt a glimmer of hope. But as they ascended, the lights flickered, and the whispers returned. This time more insidious, more malevolent. "You cannot escape," they seemed to say. "You are ours." The elevator shuddered to a stop, and the doors creaked open. They stepped out into what appeared to be the hospital lobby, but it was different, twisted, distorted. The air was thick with an oppressive sense of dread, and the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent life. Dr. Harper stood in the center of the lobby, her eyes glowing with an unholy light. "Welcome back," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "You can run, but you cannot hide. The hospital will consume you, just as it has consumed us." Anna felt a chill run down her spine. "What do we do now?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark stepped forward, his jaw set in determination. "We fight. We find a way to break the curse, to free ourselves and everyone else trapped here." Ethan nodded, his fear replaced by a steely resolve. "We have to find the source of the darkness, the heart of the hospital. Only then can we hope to escape." As they prepared to face whatever horrors lay ahead, Anna felt a glimmer of hope. They were not alone. They had each other, and together, they would find a way to survive. But deep down, she knew that the fight was just beginning. The hospital had many secrets, and the darkness was always watching, waiting to claim its next victims. And so, they ventured into the unknown, their fate uncertain. Their only hope the slim chance of finding a way out of the nightmare that was St. Mary's Hospital. Anna, Mark, and Ethan steeled themselves as they moved deeper into the twisted version of St. Mary's Hospital. Each step echoed ominously in the distorted corridors, filled with the scent of decay and the whispers of the damned. The hospital seemed to shift around them, its malevolent presence palpable, making each turn a gamble with their sanity. They reached a stairwell leading down into what they believed was the heart of the darkness. The air grew colder, and the whispers turned into soft, mocking laughter. As they descended, the walls seemed to close in, their surfaces slick with something that felt like blood. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on them, but they pressed on, driven by a desperate need to survive. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a large, iron door, rusted and ancient, with strange symbols carved into its surface. It pulsed with a dark energy, and the whispers became a cacophony of voices, all urging them to turn back. Mark stepped forward, his face set in grim determination. "This is it. Whatever's behind this door is the source of all this. We have to face it." Ethan nodded, his hands trembling as he gripped the crowbar. "Let's do this." Together, they pushed the door open, and a wave of cold, malevolent energy washed over them. The room beyond was vast, its walls covered in more of the strange symbols, glowing with an eerie light. In the center stood an altar, and above it, suspended in the air, was a dark, pulsating heart, the source of the hospital's evil. Dr. Emily Harper stood next to the altar, her eyes glowing with a terrible light. "You've come so far, but you will not leave here alive," she hissed, her voice echoing unnaturally. Anna stepped forward, her fear replaced by a fierce determination. "We're ending this, Emily. You won't trap anyone else here." Dr. Harper's laughter filled the room, a sound that chilled them to the bone. "You think you can stop it? This hospital has fed on the souls of the damned for centuries. You are nothing." Without warning, the shadows in the room coalesced into grotesque figures, their faces twisted in agony and rage. They surged towards the group, their ghostly hands reaching out to drag them into the darkness. Ethan swung the crowbar, striking one of the figures and dispersing it into a cloud of darkness. "Keep them back," he yelled, his voice filled with desperation. Mark and Anna fought alongside him, using whatever they could find to fend off the spectral attackers. The room echoed with the sounds of their struggle, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. Anna's eyes locked onto the dark heart above the altar. She knew instinctively that destroying it was their only hope. "Cover me," she shouted, and without waiting for a response, she sprinted towards the altar. Dr. Harper moved to intercept her, but Mark tackled her to the ground, grappling with her as she screamed in rage. "Go, Anna. Destroy it." Anna reached the altar, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She grabbed a scalpel from a nearby tray and plunged it into the heart, feeling a wave of dark energy surge through her. The heart pulsed violently, and a scream of pure agony filled the room, the shadows convulsing and recoiling. "Yes," Ethan shouted, swinging the crowbar wildly. "It's working." The heart's pulsations grew more erratic, and the room began to shake, cracks appearing in the walls and floor. Anna twisted the scalpel deeper, the dark energy tearing at her, but she held on, determined to see it through. With a final, deafening scream, the heart exploded in a burst of dark energy, the shockwave knocking them all to the ground. The spectral figures dissolved into nothingness, and the whispers ceased, leaving a profound silence in their wake. Anna lay on the cold floor, gasping for breath. She could feel the darkness receding, the malevolent presence dissipating. Slowly, she got to her feet and looked around. Mark was helping Ethan up, both of them looking battered but alive. Dr. Harper lay motionless on the ground, her eyes closed, the unnatural glow gone. The room, once filled with dark energy, now felt empty, abandoned. "We did it," Anna whispered, barely able to believe it. "We actually did it." Mark nodded, a tired but relieved smile on his face. "Let's get out of here." They made their way back through the now silent corridors, the oppressive atmosphere lifting with each step. The hospital, though still eerie, felt like an ordinary place again, its dark heart destroyed. As they reached the exit, the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, casting a warm glow over the hospital's cold, sterile surfaces. They stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces. For a moment, they stood in silence, absorbing the reality of their escape. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but the memories of what they had seen and felt would haunt them forever. "Let's never come back here," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "Agreed," Mark replied, "but we need to make sure no one else gets trapped in there again." Anna nodded, her mind already racing with plans to ensure the hospital's dark secrets were never forgotten, never allowed to fester again. As they walked away, the sun rose higher, its light chasing away the last remnants of the night. They had survived the elevator of death, but they knew that some horrors could never be truly erased, only guarded against, so that others might never have to face them.